Thank you very much. I know we're approaching lunch quickly, and I would like also to get some comments and response from you, so I'll try to do it as briefly and quickly as possible. Basically, what I'm going to talk about is images of science and technology, implicit or explicit images or allusions to science and technology in artworks. Specifically, I'm going to look at artworks by Gerhard Richter and Ólafur Eliasson to see how they can be related to popular discourses about innovation and risk. The first artwork I'm going to present you with is Gerhard Richter's Strontium. It was produced in 2004 and is permanently installed in the De Young Museum in San Francisco. As you can see from this image, it's a gigantic mural in a sense. It's a photographic mural, 9 by 9 meters wide, and it's installed in the museum's public space, the Wilsley Gallery. It's made up by 130 smaller photographs, so-called C-prints, that were installed to give this to produce this gigantic photographic mural. Gerhard Richter, I suppose, needs not so large an introduction. He's one of the world's most famous and most expensive artists at the present day. There are many retrospectives and exhibitions with his art all over the world. He's a German artist born in 1932 and was trained in Eastern Germany, in Dresden, before he moved to Düsseldorf. He's probably best known for his photo paintings where he takes photographs and turns them into he takes photographs and turns them into paintings. He often introduces a blurring effect so that the original image is slightly or more or less blurred. He has made several images like Strontium, and I'll explain in the next image. I'll explain what Strontium shows. I will just say here that Strontium is part of a larger interest of Gerhard Richter in producing photographs and paintings showing basically atomic structures. This is a painting. This is a photo painting of Gerhard Richter called Silicat or Silicon. And back to Strontium. Strontium is basically a photographic reproduction of a scientific image produced by advanced scanning probe microscopy. As the scientific image shows the surface of strontium titanate, a crystal that is important in many industrial applications. It's kind of is often referred to as an artificial diamond structure, strontium titanate, and this is the way it looks when it has been visualized. This is how the surface of it looks when it has been visualized using this scanning probe microscopy. So Richter's painting is a reproduction. It's digitally manipulated. He's added a slight blurring to it, and he also enlarged it. He enlarged the original image to produce this gigantic photograph that I showed you before. So it feeds into different kinds of artistic traditions, such as pop art, but perhaps more prominent op art, the art that produces optical illusions or optical effects by means of art. So standing in front of the mural, you can see perhaps, or you can think that you get this optical effect of a slightly changing shapes. It's very difficult to focus in this large image. If you move closer, you can see how Richter blurred the image somewhat. He introduced this his famous technique of blurring, so all of these shapes are slightly blurred. It's a blurring that is also present in the original image. I didn't find the original image, but here's another scientific image of strontium titanate, and as you can see, these images also tend to be slightly blurred due to the instrumental artifacts, but also, of course, due to the fundamental question of the fundamental uncertainties involved in imaging structures at the quantum mechanical level. So that's Gerhard Richter's strontium. I'm not going to offer you any new interpretations of this image. I'm going to focus on how it has been received by, how it is being presented by the museum, and how it was received in 2005 when it was installed in San Francisco. So at the de Jong's homepage, you can see that they say that strontium basically reflects Richter's long-standing artistic and philosophical investigation into the relation between the mirror, the window and the mirror of representation. So he's interested in how do we see, how do we perceive, and how do we recognize things by means of different types of technologies, in a sense. By organizing the photographs into a monumentally scaled mural, Richter calls into attention the aggregate experience of the discrete yet undetectable instants that make up our experience of reality. So they're drawing similarities between the scientific investigation into the atomic structure of strontium titanate and everyday experience of reality. Using his signature blurring of images, Richter manipulates existing photographs of strontium titanate and thereby underscores the impermanence of these atomic structures. What they're talking about here is essentially the epistemological skepticism that Richter is well known for. His photo paintings quite often are interpreted as giving a blurred very often is interpreted as reproducing our own difficulties of remembering and seeing things, right? The personal experiences of you don't really see things clearly. And here it is represented again, this epistemic uncertainty in the reproduction of artistic images. However, there are also other connotations attached to strontium, and this is a newspaper article from 2005 when strontium was first revealed to the public in San Francisco. The title is "The subject may be radioactive, yet Richter's image is quite cool." To Americans of a certain age, the title strontium will recall the nuclear test fallout scare of the late 1950s. Researchers around the world then detected elevated levels of the metal's radioactive isotope, strontium-90, which entered the global and especially the American food supply. It's important here to note also that the de Jong Museum is only about 500 kilometers away from the original Nevada test site where atmospheric nuclear tests were being carried out, which led to this strontium-19 fallout. And Richter, for one, would welcome this allusion to military and technological risks. We can look into his atlas. That's where he keeps collections of the images that inspire him to do artworks. And we can find how he was inspired. We can see here how he was inspired to do strontium. It was from this newspaper clipping in the upper left corner from Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, where Richter first encountered this image. And as you can read, the heading of this newspaper article is "Atome in Reihe und Glied," atoms in rank and file. So very clearly here, the military connotations of these aligned atoms are being rendered very clearly. In this atlas, there are different pages. This is page number 746, if I'm not mistaken. The page before that, 745, is interesting also because here you have a juxtapositions of things, of parallel lines, very similar to the strontium atom lines and the Twin Tower attack in 2001, which later led Richter to produce this image, this painting of the attacks. The story has it, I have time to tell that story. The story has it that when the attacks occurred in 2001, Richter was on his way across the Atlantic to an exhibition opening in New York, and his plane was redirected. So, yeah, a small anecdote. Returning to Kenneth Baker's article, so Richter is also known for being mindful of history, and he may welcome that association of strontium and the nuclear fallout of strontium-90. But he doesn't mention that in his proposal, Kenneth Baker observes. He says only that Richter's proposal for the mural mentions only strontium titanate unusually high index of refraction, outshining diamonds in crystalline form and its use in optics. So Richter himself did not explicitly make this allusion to nuclear risks in the 50s and 60s. This was something that was drawn out here. He only referred to the mural as talking about scientific representation and how science is also used in the world of optics in technological applications. The last quote, I think, by Baker, Richter probably also likes the electron microphotograph as an image of physical reality normally invisible. The scientific instrument's extension of an unaided sensory awareness parallels that of the museum. A nice reflective remark, I think, here. I'll move now to talk about Ólafur Eliasson, and then I'll, in the end, try to make some concluding remarks about the two artworks that I have been talking about. Ólafur Eliasson is a Danish Icelandic artist. He's from another generation, as you can see, than Gerhard Richter. He was born in 1962, if I remember correctly. And here he is at one of his latest installations at the Louisiana Museum in Denmark, where he produced this installation called Riverbed. You may not see it, but you can see that it's essentially the reconstruction of an Icelandic landscape in the museum. Other famous artworks by Ólafur Eliasson or the artwork that made him internationally renowned, I suppose, is the 2003 installation in Tate Modern of the Weather Project. In 2008, he installed the New York City waterfalls, 4 artificial waterfalls in New York City. This one under the Brooklyn Bridge. I also need to show an image from my own hometown, Aarhus, where Richter installed this panoramic walkway on top of the local art museum. So you can basically walk around in this panorama, this rainbow panorama, and see the city of Aarhus through the colors of the rainbow. So I was originally intending to talk about the Weather Project, because that's the most well-known of Eliasson's projects. But in researching for this presentation, I came across one of his newest projects, namely the Little Sun Charger, and a video with Ólafur Eliasson where he explains some of the ideas behind his arts. And I thought that Eliasson could do the talking for me, and he'll do that in the next slide. First, I'll just present you with this slide, showing a very common way to interpret and to understand Eliasson's art. It's from a 2001 publication by Christa Steinle and Peter Weibel called Surroundings Surrounded. They say, in his installations, Ólafur Eliasson deals with the factors of human perception in an age of technology and the laws of nature from the perspective of their anthropological relativity. It's almost STS, isn't it? His work addresses the question of our conception of nature and the technical aids that we use to observe, construct, and measure it. And now we come to the video. Let me see. do we need? We need to put this in, I think, to get some sound. And we need to start it. It's about 3 minutes long.
When I think about a work of art, I very often think about, well, what's the consequences of making a work of art or looking at a work of art? And it's interesting to me that, you know, one often thinks of creativity being, should I say, in the...
It's too loud, so... It's okay? Okay. So, little sun charge.
When I think about a work of art, I very often think about, well, what's the consequences of making a work of art or looking at a work of art? And it's interesting to me that, you know, one often thinks of creativity being, should I say, in the artwork, where I would argue that the creativity is really, you know, in the consequences that the work of art has onto the world. So creativity is actually, you know, what the work of art somehow does to its surroundings. And I think this is very much how I thought about Little Sun as well. You know, I thought, well, I have a certain sense of creativity, design, art, but very much around, well, how do you then implement it, or how do you use it to sort of, you know, influence the world around you? And I was very interested in solar energy, and this is how I met also my friend who's a solar engineer. And we then thought about, well, can we take what is exciting about art, you know, the thing about that when immersing yourself in a cultural event, if you want, you kind of see yourself. Do you know what I mean? You're actually not looking at a work of art to see what is the artist thinking. You're looking at a work of art to sort of see what am I thinking myself. I haven't just quite verbalized it yet. You know, it's very emotional. And I thought, well, why don't we address energy or an energy axis and this whole thing about the sun, solar energy, right? So it's very interesting. We all own the sun together. It's very interesting. I mean, the fact that nobody yet at least actually owns the sun, and we can take a solar panel, do you know what I mean? And we can sort of charge. And now this is like a power station, but actually, you know, if it's a work of art, it's actually more than a power station, because it's also about, if you charge your power station, you actually charge yourself. So it becomes very emotional, right? So it's very much about, well, resources. What is a resource? Is it something in your heart, or is it something in your hand? And obviously it's a little bit of both, but I like this idea, well, energy is not just, you know, access to energy is to feel energized, you know, to feel that you have the resources to do something, right? And this is what art is about too, right? It's very much about, well, is a work of art something that makes you feel in a certain way? So in that sense, the Little Sun project and the charger, the phone charger, is very much about, well, giving you a sense of liberty, right? Are you going to be independent? My phone is out of power and the sun is shining. I have access to power for free. It's free energy. I mean, once you have it, right, it's free. So for me, working on art and making Little Sun is very synchronized. It's very much about the same questions.
Yeah, as you can see, this is a video that's online on The Wired. They have a whole feature about Eliasson's Little Sun charge. His idea about using art for technological purposes and crossing over art and engineering is very much has been well received in many places. I found this comment on a tech blog called TechCrunch, where they talk about Eliasson's project, and he says he's ideally placed to straddle the divide between the arts and technology. At his studio in Berlin, he surrounds himself with engineers, coders, technicians, architects and craftspeople, anyone who might help him to realize his vision for an ambitious new project. Eliasson is clear that these questions, that's the artistic questions, will always come first, and the technological tools are there to serve his artistic vision. It's refreshing, Eleanor Turney writes, to talk to an artist who is confident in his own ideas and doesn't see technology as a magic fix, that technology is used to further an idea or realize a vision. Concluding remarks, I will draw out some of the images of risk and innovation that I found in these two artworks, that I think are present in these two artworks. Richter's work is about creating new ways of knowing the world, but it's and I didn't put this in the slide, but it's very important to understand that Richter is essentially skeptical about the ability of art and science and technology to produce representations. So it's a very much an epistemic skepticism that comes out of Richter's work. He shows science as techno-science, technology enabling science, but also science enabling technology. He focuses implicitly on the unintended consequences of new technology. It's a very traditional risk discourse in the sense that is prevalent in the Richter's strontium. And he also alludes to the fact that science is enrolled in military and industrial complexes. In contrast, Eliasson's project shows that science, technology and art produce new ways of knowing the world, including yourself, and Eliasson has there's no skepticism involved in this epistemological reading of Eliasson's work. It's also very much about doing something to the world, right? Eliasson is emphasizing creativity as something you can do unto the world, including yourself. You can change the world by means of science and technology. He has no problem seeing arts, science and technology as integrated into business. In fact, this little sun charger project is a business project that is going on right now. He's kickstarting money, he's crowdfunding on Kickstarter, etc., to make a business that will produce this sun charger. And even though his art implicitly alludes to risk connected to science and technology, his work is very much about sustainability. So the whole environmental discourse, of course, is in the background. But unlike Richter, Eliasson is essentially giving away the message that using science, technology, and art, we can do something about it, we can handle risk, and we can bring about sustainability. So that's my concluding remarks. Thanks very much.